Games. Sometimes you play test with other folk. Sometimes they refuse to take a joke. Sometimes they think that it's all really good, but maybe it's not, and maybe they should listen. I don't know, that sounds really harsh. Um, Basically, today is about people, for whatever reason, well, firstly, 10 a.m. ish, emphasis on the ish because it's 10 and 18. It's still 10 a.m. ish, kind
It's
of.
ish.
I mean, it's not like 11 a.m., it's closer to 10 a.m. So, but yeah. And we're talking about episode 950, how to give feedback to stubborn people. And I wrote this really quickly, and I tried to be clear rather than kind, to use your thing.
Yay!
But
That is one of my favorite phrases. Well, my favorite things to think about.
um, and it's sometimes someone's in love with their idea, and you ask, "Oh, is this a published game?" And they say, "Oh, yes, it's absolutely already published. It's on the Game Crafter, and I bought a copy. It's published."
Mm.
And then you kind of, it's like, I mean, fair enough if that's all they were aiming for, but if what they were aiming for was like a big audience, then that's clearly not the end point.
Mm.
And maybe conversely, there are some people who think, oh yeah, Monopoly does really well because it's got this roll and move, and we think people really want to go round. And so, yeah, I think that how do you deal with people like this? How do you give them clear feedback while still retaining a modicum of kindness? Because it's kind of important to be kind, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But so there's something here about. So the way I approach this sort of thing tends to be to look at what they're aiming for,
Mm, mm,
because
mm.
because you always have to remember that what somebody else is aiming for might not be what you're aiming for.
Yes.
And it might also be that uh, that they are poorly expressing what they're aiming for. It might be that they're not quite sure what they're aiming for. And so there's a real difference between someone who's said, okay, my target audience, my target audience is the parents of 6-year-olds running up to Christmas. Now, you're going to give them an entirely different game to a target audience of, people who really want to play bridge, for
Sure,
example.
sure.
Um, so, to a certain extent, you're looking at this and you're going, okay, well, if they're being stubborn, are they being stubborn about the feedback, or have they got something of their target audience wrong? Because it's like, where's the stubbornness coming in? Because it's perfectly okay to say, okay, a roll and move. I'm not that keen on that one, but you know,
And that's a fair thing.
yeah.
Like sometimes it is that someone's just got a different target audience, and that's totally fair. Like, I mean, on our Friday daytime playtests, I'm not going to mention anyone by name if I'm bad mouthing them, but I'm going to mention Gorm, who's come in and said, you know what, I'm making this game. I want to make stuff with wood, and I want people to buy my wooden things, and that's what I'm aiming for. And I
Mm,
want a game that's good enough that people will buy this thing made out of wood if the wood is pretty enough. And
mm,
their game, it's very niche. It's not got a it's not the kind of game that, if they were aiming for 10,000 or like 100,000 copies, I would be like, oh, I don't know, you need to simplify it somewhat. But as it is, it's fine. They could go to conventions and markets and explain their game and have people fall in love with it and carry on
mm,
in this kind of niche way. And that's totally fine. But then it's the people who come in and say, you know what, I believe that my game is going to reach these hundreds of thousands of people, or
mm,
someone who and I'm not going to name names, but someone who's on Kickstarter has had like 20 projects um not funded, 20 projects created, maybe two of them funded, and the ones that were funded got like £100 total. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, this is the most amazing thing ever. You people are ungrateful. You people who are saying that there's problems with my
Mm-hmm.
writing, you're ungrateful and you just don't know good writing. And why don't you listen to me? And why don't you just support me and buy my book? Why does no one see my genius? I mean, those are very different, yeah, scenarios.
There's a difference between stubborn and delusional, isn't there? I think.
Yes, yeah. I mean, some people are misguided and then they understand, oh, wait, so now I understand things. And some people are simply unwilling to
Mm.
see things when they're presented with evidence. And isn't that unwilling to change your mind when presented with evidence? Stubbornness in a low form and delusional in a great form. It's kind of the same
Yeah.
spectrum.
Yeah, it depends, and I might have said delusional in a glib way, but sometimes we can all be a bit delusional about things.
Mm,
To a certain extent, we look at things and we go, oh yes, this will work really well. And it's during the design process, then it's quite difficult sometimes to let go of those things that you thought, oh, this would work really well. There's a game I have in my head which I've tried several times, and what's come out has just not worked. So I have an idea about a card game, a bit like Rummy, but you're taking tricks, but you're scoring like Rummy afterwards. You're scoring on the sets, but you're taking tricks. But where there are going to be seven suits, and
wow.
you decide at the beginning which one is trumps. Basically, it's like a rainbow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, this will work. Tried it a couple of times with virtual playtesting, and it just doesn't work. The idea is great,
Mm.
but it just doesn't work. And I think that it can be quite difficult for people to let go of a brilliant idea to see that
Or something,
occasionally,
I
yeah.
mean, something that you're in love with. And I think that's the key thing. I mean, look, I've got this idea for a deck construction game, and I've got this grand idea for like uh um organized play and people falling in love with it. And the truth is, I kind of know that what I'm aiming for is a long shot. I know it has low probability of actually working out. I mean, people have enjoyed the game, but from people enjoying the game to people having coming to a shop to play it like every week, that's a big ask for people. And to do deck construction, that's a big ask. And I think that the difference is I'm going on because I'm saying, you know what, even if I don't make it, I'm willing to put in the work. And but
Mm.
to be honest with myself, that's taken a lot of time and I guess experience as a game designer to be okay with that. Because I mean, I've probably reached like millions of people with Yogi, which is amazing to think that so many copies have been sold. Like, if at least, I don't know, four people played each copy on average, like I've reached 1 million people.
Mm.
So that's, pretty good. And it's amazing. It's not like anywhere near, the success of some games. Well, I I feel like somewhat validated and secure in myself, I guess. But at the same time, I do have this, oh, I want to do this, but it's unlikely. But then some people, I think this is what they want, this is what they need, and it's about having so much of your ego in one single project that if you think, you know what, this single project is unlikely to happen, then I take that personally. I would like to take a step back very quickly and talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing delights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Fundamentally, I'm feeling really rubbish. I'm in Glasgow, not been back to London. I'm in my old parents' place, and they're not here right now. But I'm just kind of spending spent most
Sitting,
of the day
relaxing.
yesterday on the internet with Board Game Arena. I played lots of Sushi Go, quite appreciating that. Photosynthesis, I finally lost 2 games, both of them free player. So I'm like 21 games out of 23 that I've won. So I'm trying.
That's a pretty good score, though. Yeah, that's pretty good. Number of games to have won.
Yeah, like I'm pretty good at it. And if anyone wants, it is making me slightly sad that I've not lost any 2-player games, because I feel like the opening free moves, the more I play it, the more it feels kind of scripted, if you know what I mean, which is slightly saddening to me, because before, when I played something and then other people would play differently, I'd be like, oh, exciting. Is there something going on here? And now I'm like, yeah, they're going to lose, because they don't realize that going on this particular corner from your first move is clearly the best spot, which is slightly sad to think it's that scripted.
So are there a certain number of other moves they can make? Because, for example, in chess, you've got, the such and such gambit and the such and such opening move, and which all have ways you can get out of them, but you've got to know how to get out of them. So
I'm not sure. It might just be that I've not played enough really good players yet, because it says but like I'm on arena mode, and what I really don't like is that arena mode is 3 players, where I think it really should be 2 players to have more competition, because in 3 players, if one player ends up blocking the other one, then in 2 players that's a really good move, but in 3 players, well, you can block them back and that's fine, but then the 3rd player is going to win, and it kind of becomes about politics, if you know what I mean, which I'm not a fan of. But like, yes, the very first move is scripted, but bear in mind that then the second placement, I'm not sure about that one. So it's kind of already off the rails, which is kind of nice. But yeah, photosynthesis, I'm still enjoying it, even though once you've placed the second thing, I'm fairly sure the first 3 turns are then scripted, kind of loosely, but then where you place, it's still unsure. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's going to get more and more solved the more I play it, but I'm still enjoying it. I'm still enjoying the feeling of growth, and I'm not going to lie, constantly winning games against people does give me some sense of validation.
It is good, actually. It is a good feeling to win a game. You don't have to talk about that. We all feel like that.
Sorry, what are your recent highlights? I never asked you.
Oh, recent highlights. The number of games which have appeared.
Yeah, you've got some ridiculous shipments. You showed photos.
Those are going to be sent out, but here we have, let's see what you can see, in my children's bedroom.
Bigger?
I've taken a huge slice of the kids' bedroom to become the game, the game room. There's another huge pile elsewhere as well. So
that is amazing. And how many copies are in each box?
6 in each box. So I've got
do you have one that's out?
So I have 1,000 games. Yeah. Oh. Do I have one out? No, I don't have one that's out of the box at the moment. They're all in other boxes. I can easily get one out of these boxes, which have not been sellotaped down yet. So this is what the Kickstarter backers will be getting, a box like this. So I keep catching the wire on here. And in this exciting box,
I mean, you say that with a bit of sarcasm, of course. It's a plain box. It's a plain round box. And that's the exciting box. That's the exciting box, which is so shiny. It's clearly got shrink wrap on it.
It has. It's got shrink wrap on the outside. It's got no shrink inside it. So this was one of the compromises we made. So it is made from FSC wood. Wood and card, which is good. But yeah, when we were talking to them, they said, look, it's coming on a ship from China. Quite a lot of German manufacturers do it where they don't do shrink, or they have something else on it. Hero Time, I think, which is not who we went with. We went with Long Pack. Hero Time, I believe, has a biodegradable shrink wrap. But Long Pack, basically, we've got normal shrink on the outside, but no plastic components at all inside. Plus, when I'm packaging them out for the UK consumers, then it is wrapped in copies of newspaper.
Have you just been kind of storing your old newspapers for a wee while?
I have. We have an awful lot of we've got various newspapers. Plus, well, my experience from last time says that when I run out, I just go around to Lidl and ask them if they've got old newspapers, because they often do.
Nice. Well, yeah, it seems like a nice achievement to firstly get that, to be sending it out. That is fantastic. Congratulations. And yeah, we were talking about winning games being a brilliant thing. It's a little thing which is brilliant. Because whilst games are not primarily about who wins and who loses, I think we all agree it's about spending time around a table or about learning what's going on. But there is something really nice about winning the game. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. And just
there is something nice about being able to say, "Oh yes, this challenge I was set. I have completed it, and I have not only completed it, I have completed it better than anybody else."
Feeling like you've managed to excel. It's kind of similar to, I mean, you are the best at creating a game called Labyrinth and sending it out. No one else has done that ever.
Yeah.
I mean, let's facetiously.
Quite an interesting thing.
Whilst obviously that's an overly specific thing, it's still an achievement to have gone through the Kickstarter, and now is the moment. Once the people are actually getting their thing, that's when the task is completed, and it's like you've won the game. You've beaten the challenge, right?
Exactly. Once I actually finish sending them out, because I have a number of boxes packed. Yesterday was the first batch that went out to UK backers. The US backers, those games are in the middle of the Panama Canal, so they are coming up there, and they will be sometime soon at the fulfillment centre. But yeah, but the UK backers, I'm sending them all out myself, and there'll be about 400 or so of them, and so far I've got through 20.
So yeah, it'll take probably a couple of weeks. But
more than a couple of weeks, probably. Actually, it will probably be the end of April before they're sent out. Realistically,
that's totally fair, and I'm sure that you're keeping them informed and you're making it clear and fair.
Exactly.
And so, at this point, we'll get back to the main topic. As always, to the people watching, please do feel free to comment, ask questions. If you've got your own ideas for how you can be fair and clear, but also be kind. I mean, let's examine that statement, because in the past you've said that in business, for sure, it's important to be clear and then fair and then kind. But when you're giving feedback, whilst we do consider this to be a peer-to-peer situation, if someone comes along for the first time and then is looking for feedback on their game, whatever their game, well, firstly, on our playtest group, we say the first time you come, don't expect to necessarily play something. Please spend one day just playtesting other people's stuff to get an idea of the group. Although, if they come for the full day and their game doesn't have too high demands, then we will try to slot them in at one point, because like it can still. Fairness is in providing that information, we are trying to be clear and fair. But once they've got their slots, once it's okay, these are my 90 minutes to show off my game and get feedback, within that, I think we try to be kind. Is that wrong?
So, to a certain extent, I think the clarity has already been established, because you all know the situation you're in. You're at a playtest. That is clear. They are showing off their game. There's no sort of, there's no blurred lines about, whether you're just going to the pub for a drink, versus whether you're doing a formal playtest. So there is some clarity there already. I think kindness is probably a good one to go with, because I suspect that you because wait, how can I say this? When it's a case where you know what you're talking about, then I think clarity comes fairly easily. When you're saying, okay, right, I understand games, I know what's wrong, then I think it can be quite easy to be clear and not kind. So perhaps focusing on the kind could do that. But I do think it probably would be important to be kind as well. But I think that one of the important things, and I've seen at some playtests that people do ask this and others that they don't. One of the important things would be to ask at the beginning. So, what are you hoping this game becomes? Who's your audience for it? People often ask, so are you planning to send this to a particular publisher? Are you planning to kickstart this? Things like that. And I think that it's actually quite important to ask those questions, because then you get a sense of who the audience is.
That's a really good point of making sure that clarity of the target audience is set up front, because again, if they're just hoping to show this thing to 100 people, have it be a thing that I did, that I ticked off my bucket list, I made a game, that's a totally different proposition to I want to make a game that's commercially viable, that's going to generate some income, or
You might also, people sometimes think, okay, target audience, that sounds really marketing, and it kind of is, because we're talking about it, like it's a marketing thing, because that's a phrase that resonates. But what we actually mean is we actually mean the players, who's going to be playing this game. And the thing is that games, of course, don't work without players.
Yes.
So whereas there are some people who go, well, I haven't thought about my target audience, you've got to sit them down and say, actually, perhaps this is a case of, giving feedback to stubborn people, saying, look, I know that you don't want to think about this, but you've got to think about who your players are, because just saying this is a game for everybody, and I think, in fact, you've said that before. I think on one of my Kickstarter pages, I might have had something that started with, well, it's for everybody, and you said, actually, it's not for everybody, which is, well, not quite, it's not for everybody, but it's a really good reminder that you've got to think about
it's not
who
for
your
everybody.
players are.
Nothing's for everybody.
Exactly.
Well,
Well, it's the thing that people often say, and I think it's one of those things where
it's a
sometimes
cop-out.
we start believing it. We start believing it's for everybody, whereas actually that's a silly thing. Nothing can be for everybody. Nobody likes everything. I don't know, breathing air, drinking water. But apart from that,
there's sometimes that people really go a long time without drinking water because they've got mental issues, or like some people and breathing air. Yes, we continue doing it, but it's more of an involuntary thing. I don't think we can say we like it. But yeah, sure, breathing air and having oxygen around within our blood is a thing for every living human. I will agree with that. But yeah.
But there aren't that many things that are universal, particularly once you start getting into things like games and, who enjoys playing which things. Yes, you could say there are some things which are more popular, and there are some things that a greater percentage of people will enjoy them. But there's nothing that's, that's absolutely universal, because, the world doesn't work like that.
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of hypothetical examples, and let's maybe talk about how we would react to them. So let's imagine someone has hand-drawn a bunch of stuff, puts it on Game Crafter, and at the end of and it seems quite crudely drawn, let's say. It seems like something that probably wouldn't appeal to anyone. Well, and wouldn't appeal to anyone is a strong word. Like, obviously, there's always going to be someone who's a fan of this style. But and then at the end they say, what do you think of the graphics? What would you say to them? Because this is, yeah.
So, I think there are some phrases that come to mind. and one is it's not for me. The other one would be, well, it's a niche audience. And I think, and I think I'd probably say both of those first and say, look, this doesn't appeal to me. Maybe it's a small audience, maybe it's something quite niche. But then I'd have to sort of say, well, hang on, where are you trying to get to? Was this what you wanted it to look like? When you thought about it in your head, was this the absolute, the aim of what you wanted to look like? Because maybe it was, in which case it would be like, okay, well, in that case, that's a really small audience, and it might be difficult to find people who are going to like it, and that's okay if that's for you. But if you wanted other people to buy it, that might be a bit difficult. But it might be that actually they didn't. Yeah, they felt that there was something missing. In which case, it would be okay. What else did you think it was going to look like? What did you want it to be? What were you aiming at? You've drawn these sort of cartoony creatures. Did you want them to be more? So maybe it's somebody who's drawn some sketches of things, and you've got to ask, okay, it's not necessarily the case that everybody wants everything to be really polished.
I think that what you're talking about and exploring what their vision is a really good way to go, because sometimes it is part of the idea of, well, this looking a bit sketchy is part of this, or this is important to me, or I mean, myself, if I saw something that I felt was bad, I might say, well, it's not necessarily for me, and I think that this art is something that could actively turn off some people. But and like maybe that's being less kind after having talked about being super kind, but that's what I would say if they had point blank asked me that question.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's good to reference other things as well. So if we think about, so I don't know how familiar sort of people in general would be, but if you talk about, say, the art that goes with the Monty Python cartoons.
Oh yeah, that's gorgeous.
So some people think it's absolutely gorgeous. Some, but it's quite crude. It's quite suggestive.
Yes.
Yes, it can be quite rude art as well, and and people might sort of go, oh, actually, that really turns off a lot of people. So it's okay, right? Did people like this or did they not? There can be some art which is, some people love the art which goes with Quora Quest, the kid dungeon crawler that came out. Because that is children's art where they've taken the children's art and then they sort of professionally coloured it in, and it looks. I mean, so to my mind, it looks really nice. There's a really good sort of style to that, because I'm like, oh, okay, so you can see that it's children's drawings, but it's really good children's drawings, and it's got that, done by a 7-year-old feel.
Yeah, it's got like all the proportions all slightly wrong, but it's like done through the eyes of a child. It is a really interesting thing, but then at the same time, it's got this kind of surrealism to it, which is really lovely. And
they knew their audience.
Yeah, for sure. Like when you're giving feedback, there's the danger again of being too sure in your own feedback. You can ask the question, well, am I the one being delusional? Because let's say I was looking at Quora Quest, and let's imagine I looked at that and I were to say, you know what, this is it's not for me. This could turn off a lot of people. I mean, maybe I'm being wrong when I'm saying that.
And that, I think, is why the audience is so crucial, because Quora Quest, the people who are buying Quora Quest tend to be parents, buying it to play with their kids. That's their audience. I mean, yes, it's also sort of more established gamers who may not have children, but I think their crucial audience there was going, okay, we'd like a dungeon crawler which is very suitable for children, and we'd like a funny dungeon crawler story there. So, they really know their audience.
Do you think it would be more better for me as a playtester to say this would turn me off personally, but you'd have to do some more focus testing to determine what it is for other people. But and do you think it would be better for me to not even guess, even if I do have an intuition, that it would turn other people off?
So I think that
Because
it's probably good to so it's probably definitely good to say your personal opinion, and say,
yes.
look, this would turn me off, and specifically when there's something where you go, okay, this particular thing. There was a game I looked at which had where this was on one of the Protospiel onlines. The artwork, so the game was practically ready to go. The artwork had a lot of sort of not quite lime green flames, but sort of fluorescent-y type things,
Okay.
which really turned me off. And I said, look, I really don't like that. I just don't like that color. And the people there said, yeah, actually, that's about 60-40. 40% of people really don't like it, and well, not quite. It was probably more like, they said, look, some people really don't like it, slightly more people really love it. So they knew it was quite divisive, and I think that was really useful that I'd pinpointed it's that
It's like
colour
Dinosaur
particularly.
Island, where it's like this super garish color, and I love that, but some people clearly won't.
Yeah. Then there are things where your personal opinion can be completely wide of the mark. So, for example, if this is an unpopular opinion, I do not like Sushi Go. I hate the artwork. Absolutely hate it. I'm not entirely certain what it is, but it's
Food
just
with smiley
slightly.
faces turns you off.
It's not just that, it's that artwork somehow is particularly creepy. It's not just the food with the smiley faces. There's something about it. There's a ride in Chessington World of Adventures called such and such Bubble Works, which is the scariest visuals ever in the history of the world, and it's a kids' ride. And there is something I just hate about it, and I don't know what it is. So sometimes there are things when you're like, okay, this is just me, but I really don't like it. So knowing when it's just you is quite useful.
I would
Sometimes
like to
guessing.
actually very quickly, if I can,
Google the
share
bubble.
my screen. So this is the art that you're talking about, I assume.
Yeah, it's just there's something just slightly creepy about it. I just don't know.
And how do you feel about this earlier artwork?
I think it's the mouths. No, I don't like that. I don't like it. I mean, it's the mouths. It's the slightly open. I just don't know what it is. There we go.
Fair enough. So, like, parts of why people come to playtest with other designers is so that they can get feedback from people who have some understanding of the market. And so I think to just say, this is my personal point of view, is kind of denying them that. I don't know, maybe this is kind of bigging up myself excessively, but it does feel like, look, there's some stuff that I know that I am in the minority, well, not in the minority necessarily, but it's not a widely held opinion. Like, I do have I don't like dice games in general. If your game has lots of dice, I am going to enjoy it less than the typical person. Also, if your game has a potential to have very variable game length and a potential to go on for very long, a lot of gamers will dislike that, but I will abhor that. I will avoid it like that's like anathema to me. And so, but I will mention those things because obviously I've played many, many games with other people. I've watched people playing games like hundreds of times, probably thousands of times. Must be thousands of times. But yeah, probably thousands of different games, let alone thousands of times. Anyway, let's carry on. And so I can draw upon a little bit of that experience to hopefully share to guide people. But then if someone is coming from a purely, hey, I believe that there's a big market for people who love Monopoly and really want something that's similar to Monopoly, but slightly different. And
Yeah.
that's my target audience. And they don't want all these complicated new rules. They want to go around a board and collect stuff and lay
Mm.
down stuff, but they want like a sequel to Monopoly, and they don't have that. So I'm coming out with something that's. And so if someone has that impression, and is it right for me to then say, you know what, I'm not sure that this market exists. I believe that the reason Monopoly is selling well is because of the inertia and the marketing rather than because of the qualities of the game. Is it right for me to do that and potentially shatter their dreams and kind of, yeah, denigrate their dreams somewhat?
I think shatter their dreams is probably less accurate. Possibly dam their dreams. Like put a big dam there so the water goes elsewhere.
Mm-mm.
Redirect them, and sometimes that can be redirecting in a very sharp right angle. In a completely different direction. I mean, the thing is that sometimes it's so. Now, how could I? I'm not sure that there is any game terrible enough that a really, really good marketing campaign by, Hasbro or, whatever, could not sell a lot of copies.
Sure.
And, and I think it's probably worth saying to people, look, okay, what are you being honest about? What have you got there? Because, the big, because sure, you could get, sure, people would buy it, but how are you going to get it into shops? How are you going to do this, this, and this? Now, there again, it's probably useful to come up with examples, and this is where we as game designers, especially people who talk to other people, can say, actually, here's a good example of someone who did something similar. Have you heard of BN1, which is a game about Brighton?
Oh, yes. Isn't that by Paul Stapleton?
Yes. So Paul did it 10 years ago or something. So that's
For those who don't know, it's a game which is primarily targeted at people who love Brighton.
Yeah. So it's basically it's a game about Brighton, based in Brighton. So you might think of that as being the next step after Monopoly, actually, because it's got some of the same feel. It's targeted at the same audience, but Paul has actually got two different modes of play. One of which is standard roll and move, very much like Monopoly. The other of which you play using cards. It's a bit like Monopoly, but you're playing just using community chest cards, and there are lots more, and they allow you to move. So it's got a lot of the similarities with a roll and move that people will be expecting, and that people who live in Brighton and go, oh, actually, this is great. This is a game just about my hometown. Yeah, so that is a really good example of where you can look at something like that and go, okay, right, what's the, who am I thinking the players are going to be? What's the thing and the atmosphere and the style I want to capture? And then make it into a really good example of that. Because there's nothing wrong with a roll and move, just as long as it's a good roll and move where you've thought about what are your choices here, where it's not just luck. Perhaps you've got multiple dice, perhaps you can move in multiple directions rather than just, keeping on the same track. There are lots of things where when you're sort of thinking about non-gamers, there are lots of things you can make your game appeal to people who have only really played games like Monopoly.
I mean, sometimes even a game which is entirely luck, I'm actually going to look at to see if I can find it, because there's one game, I'm not going to mention the name, which I'm not a fan of at all. And because it was very nicely produced, and at conventions they typically had a couple of people sitting down and playing a much longer game of it than I would be willing to play. And they seemed, although I've not seen them for quite a while, so I don't know, maybe their success was short lived or not as much as it appeared. but I like there is a small number of people who are perfectly happy. They sometimes just want to sit down and roll a bunch of dice and have that abnegation, say that yes, my success is down to how I rolled, and that's what they're looking for. And
Sure.
so, but what's I feel like should we start wrapping up, or do you have something? Because it's been a really
Yeah,
interesting
let's
chat.
start wrapping up, I think.
I mean,
We've gone through quite a few bits, haven't we?
I'm going. Do you have a question of the day? Question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a list of questions before we go on our way. Question of the day as a palate cleanser from Jessica Metheringham.
Hmm. So I do have a genuine question of the day, but it's not a very exciting one,
Go
which is
for it.
how many games do you think I can carry to the post office in one go?
Oh, is it
Hmm.
going to be carried in your hands like this, or do you have a trolley or something?
Well, yesterday I took 2 big bags, which could, so each box weighs about a kilo.
I
Um,
reckon you
hmm.
could carry 24 boxes at once.
Oh, right. This time I'll try that. Yesterday I did 12 very happily without any problems. 12 was good. I'm not sure I can do 24. I might go up to 18 or something. Anyway,
So in
that's
the
going to be.
comments, tell us how many do you think Jess Medringham can carry? Are you going to try this and see how he
I'm
gets
going to
on?
try this, and I will tell you. I will tell you all via Twitter how many I managed to carry.
Okay, so guess how many, Jess? You should put this as a poll. How many do you think I can carry without
How many do you think I
at
can
least
carry?
one of them falling over on the way?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
24, I think you could do it. It might be a struggle, but I think I
Mm.
have faith that you could like just walking a little bit slower. But
Well, it's less with 24. I don't think it would be the weight. I think 24 would still be an okay weight, but they are fairly big. They're 20 centimeters by 20
yeah, I
centimeters
think you can
by
sort of
about
put your arms low
16.
and have like yeah. I'm just thinking slightly larger than four of those big boxes. That's what I was going with.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know how
Excellent.
you deal with 18. Um, at this point, over to you. What are you up to? You can share Botsy if you want to. I am, yeah, so last night I phoned up 111 to get some more pills, and yeah, because yeah, the truth is I'm having a bad episode the past week, to be honest.
Mm.
Got some major anxiety and depression. Like yesterday, I just did not make it out of the house at all. And I phoned up to get a repeat prescription on these pills, which are meant
Mm.
to make it in theory less bad than if I wasn't taking the pills at all. So, if I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't taking them at all, I'd be even worse. But then I got told that they would only give me one, like for today, and that if I wanted more, I would have to sign up with the GP. And I tried to explain that part of
Mm.
that like would take like the reason that
Days,
I
weeks,
wasn't going
maybe.
back to
Mm.
London is because I was feeling like that was like a lot to stomach. And if I'm not able to get back to London, I don't know if I'll be able to sign up with the
Mm.
GP. And then they weren't very sympathetic with that. Thankfully, one of my friends did, I did manage to source some extra things from one of my friends,
Mm-hmm.
which was meant to come. But yes, we will, which they are going to send today to arrive tomorrow if I'm still here. But
Mm.
I was hoping to get up very early. When I say very early, I just mean earlier than I've been doing typically. I went to bed around 12 and yeah, I still woke up at like 10:15, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
That I messaged you and I was like, oh my gosh, it's after
It's
10.
after 10. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, but yeah, I'm going to get that pill, take it, see if I can get down to the train, then amazing. But like, yeah, if I can't get down to the train, then to use the energy to go and get signed up seems counterproductive. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
was slightly surprised, well, very surprised and slightly saddened that a doctor would not be able to understand that.
Yeah, that sounds like they haven't quite sort of, put two and two together, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, but um,
Hmm.
today I'm going to see what I can do. I'm just taking it like a day at a time, but we'll see. Anyway, so is there any other than getting stuff into boxes and shipping them off? Is that the bulk of your day?
The bulk of my day is doing that. Plus, I also have to write up a little bit more on the website. I mean, basically, the Library Labyrinth website, we've got various things on there, but it hadn't really been updated since about November. So
Mm-mm.
it's just, so the Kickstarter updates have been going out, but there are things on the website which said things like, oh, and and we expect them at this time, and so quite a lot of stuff that just needs a little bit of tweaking. So I'm mainly doing that and this. There's also a little bit of work I'm doing which is not board game work, which I need to do today or tomorrow, and then, well, I think that's about it actually. After that, sleeping. I
Um,
need more sleeping as well.
my one question is, what are you going to be listening to? Presumably some podcasts while you're packing?
Probably not. I don't.
Music?
No, I'm going to be packing in silence. Uh,
Wow.
Generally, I do try and have something on my phone I can attempt to read at the same time, but things do not really enter into my ears. Yeah. Maybe I
Fair
should
enough.
put the radio on. It's been a while since I've. Yeah, there might be something interesting on the radio.
Let me recap and wrap up before we finish up. I mean, it doesn't feel like we came to any solid conclusions about how to help people, but some of the things that you have said I will be thinking about, like asking them questions. I mean, the Socratic method isn't, well, in theory, like if the Socratic method taken literally, it is about guiding them towards the one
Mm.
answer. But I think sometimes it's about guiding them through self discovery of, well, I don't really know the answer. And you have the information. So, what is your target audience? Because let me ask
Mm.
you these things to let me ask you what kind of feedback do you want? I think it's important to be mindful of that. I think it might be useful to give them some examples if you've got some examples and talk about your personal opinion and yeah, maybe also couch the things in subjective, like if you say, yeah, I think I am good at doing this, where I say I think that this could turn off a large number of people. I wouldn't say this will turn off. I wouldn't ever say this will turn off a large number of people because you can't be too certain of
Mm.
anything. But yeah, that feels like the bulk of what I've gathered from
Mm.
this conversation. Also, we decided that winning games is cool, and Jess will take 18 games um, to the
Maybe
post office
more.
today and we'll see how
Yeah.
that goes.
Yeah.
Jess, have you had any takeaways from today?
Thank you for asking those questions because I think it is actually that I wasn't quite sure on a lot of the answers until till we sat down and talked about them. You know,
Mm-mm.
this is how it comes about. You talk about the Socratic method. I mean, yeah, absolutely. We sit here and we go, okay, right. Let's ask each other questions, work out what the answer is from asking around, and then we'll suddenly, we'll funnel ourselves towards what the answer must be. Now, I think in this case, it's more that there are perhaps, slightly different answers for every person, slightly different answers for every circumstance, rather than one solid philosophical truth.
Mm-mm.
But it's a really useful method of doing things. It's just really useful.
Well, I'm happy that you've gotten something from the conversation. Are there
Mm.
any um, concrete decisions that, in summary, you've decided I will probably do more of this, or I might avoid that in future, or do you think you'll carry on very similarly to how you would have before this conversation?
So I think I'll probably carry on in a similar way, but it feels as though having, it feels as though it's going to be slightly easier because there are lots of things I was doing, but not necessarily doing all of them. And so thinking about this, it's like, oh, yes, I did often ask this, but not always. And sometimes I asked about the audience, and sometimes I asked about, where they wanted the game to go, and maybe I should ask both of those.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's pulling
And
it
I think
together, I think,
that's,
for me.
yeah, really good points. Asking them those key things. What do you want for this game? What's important about this game to you? And like, what do you want the game to be? And what do you think the audience is? Who do you see as the audience? And yeah, understanding their goals, like their goals in a holistic vision, like both what it is and who is playing it. Is it millions of people playing it, or is it, is it more about it being played? Is that the key thing? But yeah, if you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places. And if you want to check Jessica Metheringham out, where do you like to be found?
So generally, I hang around on Twitter still. So I am Descent Games at Twitter. You could also come and find me at librarylabyrinth.com, which is the website that I am busy sort of doing the spring cleaning of today, working out what little things need to be tweaked and changed. You can also go to descentgames.com, which is going to be spring cleaned next week, hopefully. But again, there's little things on there. But yeah, come talk to me on Twitter. We are on Facebook as well. Search for Library Labyrinth, search for Descent Games, but Twitter is where I am normally.
And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the people who've been watching and lurking. Thank you, Jess, for the conversations. Spread the word if you think that other people would gain value from this conversation, and lots of love. And for now, the only thing left to say is bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching long. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching long. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye.